Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping you're there. Welcome to our very first Ten2Two member webinar. I'm hoping this is going to be the first of many. We're hoping to help you with all of your advice and tips for finding your dream job, as well as helping to make your life a bit smoother. So in the current crisis, we wanted to offer support around all the challenges that we know our members are facing with merging schoolwork, the family and their own work, all in the environment of the home. So we're delighted today to be joined by Kathy Weston. She's a national expert on parental engagement in children's lives and learning. And I know she can't wait to get stuck into all of your questions that have been streaming in. So welcome, Kathy.
Thank you so much.
We've had, as you know, loads of questions that have already been sent in. So what we're going to do is spend the first half an hour or so trying to address those. And then we'll open up the floor to live Q&As. So for attendees, you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put things in as we go through, but we'll be coming to those at the sort of last 10-15 minutes of the webinar. These are very strange times. Everybody's managing in their own sweet way. We're going to try and tackle a broad range of topics today. So we're chunking them into the ones that people have raised the most. So without further ado, Kathy, let's get stuck. Our first question is from Karen. And what she said is, I've been feeling really anxious about the COVID crisis, but I'm aiming to keep calm. Do you think that kids pick up on this?
Thank you, Deborah. So this is probably the most important question that I'll be asked today. And it's really, really important that we help parents understand, we need to understand that mental health is highly correlated to children's mental health. So it's extremely important now more than ever that we are really careful how we're responding to the news every day, to what's going on, to being in touch with our own feelings of anxiety, which of course all of us have, and all of us have some very big concerns. But it's a hard message sometimes to absorb, but in my view, we should be ring fencing our children's happiness at the moment, their childhoods, and making sure that we absorb the adult worries and stresses, and very hard to, in a sense, insulate them from the parental stress. Now, within that bracket as well, I would urge parents to make sure as far as possible that their children are living in a family environment that is calm and stable and consistent. That's not always easy, but I think parents need to understand the critical importance of having as much peace and calm in family life at the moment. Parental conflict and stress, for example, is one of the biggest determinants of poor outcomes for children. So that lady who asked the question is absolutely on the money. It is extremely important that we take care of what we are modeling and revealing to our children in terms of our own stress. And within that, we absolutely, and I know parents are very bad at doing this, is put yourself first. Think about your own mental health. Think about what support you need. Think about who's there for you, where you can outsource, and try and just sort of do a little audit of how you're feeling, and making sure that, the support mechanisms are very much in place for you, because that will have an impact on your children.
Yeah, absolutely, Kathy. I mean, Karen, who helped us arrange the webinar, she came up with a really nice phrase, which is, you can't fill from an empty cup. And that whole thing about understanding your own feelings, I think, is really important. Leading on from that, we've had another question from Katie along the same line. So she's saying, do you have any advice or tips on how to manage a child's increased anxiety during lockdown? For example, they're worrying about getting ill, or they're missing their friends and family, that type of thing.
So this is also a very, very important question, and the evidence base around anxiety is very, very clear. So the first thing I would say depending on the age of your child, is when your child exhibits or talks about anxious things they're worried or anxious about, is to be very, very careful in your facial expression, your gestures. You know, if you look really, really anxious and panicked, and I'm really worried about that as well, that will exacerbate it. So we have to stay calm, cool, listen very actively. Depending on the age your child is, it is always good to talk about fears and worries. So it's different to opening up that space with a 13-year-old and jotting everything down and puzzling it out the way you would with a colleague. But with a 9-year-old, a younger child, we have to allow them to process those emotions whilst keeping a sort of a lid on allowing the anxiety to sort of escalate like a weed. So it's very, very important to, number one, watch your facial expression, your tone, stay calm, even if you're very alarmed by what they're worried about. Secondly, I would make sure that if you have got a very anxious child, that at the moment you have a little time in the day that's called worry time. And worry time might be, you put little worries into a jar. There's a sort of an externalizing process there, putting your worries in a jar and putting on the lid, and everybody participating, but adults not sharing adult worries, and showing your child it's absolutely normal to be worried about those little things, but this is the critical bit. What can we do? Children are feeling out of control, and part of the component of mental toughness, both for adults and children, is working out what we can control and what we can't. So give children back control by saying, yes, people are very poorly and some people are dying. That's correct. Although bracket that with the fact that young children should not be watching the news or hearing the death toll, hearing about bodies rolling out of mortuaries, etc. That is inappropriate. But I think that it is extremely important that we process those emotions, find new ways of doing that, but critically making sure that they're able to reframe it and have some control. What can we do as a family? We can help our neighbor. We can postcards to grandma. We can find new ways of connecting with people. And isn't it amazing that all these people are there helping us get through this period? Now, I recognize that that's actually quite difficult for parents to perhaps, absorb all of those techniques and things. So the other day, I actually made a resource for your parents, which is called, it's a resource for children. And what it does is, and this is very important, is help them evaluate their own emotions. The story of what happened to me during COVID, when I stopped going to school, how I felt, all the things that we've done in our learning at home, the fun stuff we've been able to do. So it hasn't all been bad. And what we're trying to do is help children and sort of nudge them towards greater resilience and help them understand, that they have missed their friends, but equally, there are many, many things to look forward to. So when you're dealing with an anxious child, there is a lot of reframing to be done. I certainly would be injecting a great deal of giggling, humor into family life. Where can you really help that child feel relaxed and calm and less anxious? And that is by using humor, which is a great component of resilience as well. Equally, this is a sort of an answer for everyone. At the moment, it's very, very important to, again, inject a sort of a sense of gratitude into the end of every day, at the end of a day conversation. The architect of these conversations in family life. What can we be grateful for today? I'm so glad the shopping came. I had a chat with a friend on the phone, and I'm really delighted that, I saw the squirrel, in the garden. It doesn't matter what it is. Gratitude reframes challenge. And we have a unique opportunity at the moment to teach our children resilient habits, resilient ways of thinking that will stand them in great stead for the rest of their lives. So I think hopefully that answers the question to some extent.
That's really, really helpful. And that resource looks fantastic. So We'll share that via email to our participants later on today. Thank you. It's interesting your point about not letting kids watch the news. What age do you think that's appropriate to? Teenagers?
So it's really, really important. This is one of the great lessons of COVID, that we have age-appropriate responses for our children. My 10-year-old is absolutely not allowed to watch the news, not in a sort of prohibitive way. He hasn't noticed it. And I'd be very careful not to have it on full blast when he's in the kitchen. And I'm a total news junkie. I love the news. But I certainly wouldn't allow them to listen to those, even for an adult, the news bulletins can be terrifying. So we have to be very, very discerning what they're reading and watching, what their digital diet is. For my 13-year-old, I still don't encourage an active interest in the news, but I would certainly be chatting to him in a sort of more teenage appropriate way about some of the challenges, and making sure I am helping him look for solutions and where we have control. So we have to keep an eye on that. We need balance. We need to make sure that our children are making sure that if they are interested in the news, that it's done in that sort of hygienic way. One big tip I would give parents is to definitely get a subscription to the Week magazine. My children have a weekly subscription to that, and the news is shared with them in an age-appropriate way, and it's a fantastic magazine. And they read about the news and the virus in a way that has been beautifully thought out. So that's an amazing thing to do, because children need to engage with the world around them, but at the moment we must keep their fear to a minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we've got a question here from Tess. And actually, when the queries and the questions started coming in, this was very high on the agenda. She says, what's the best way of lifting a teenager's mood if they're very down and withdrawn at this time? I'm struggling to get them to go for walks, exercise, or engage in other family activities. The more I try, the more it creates conflict and resentment.
Yeah, so issues around teenage low mood and the implication even of suggested depression are very, very important areas to think about. I know nationally mental health researchers are extremely concerned about teenage mental health. If we have a teenager, it should be our number one priority at the moment. First of all, to that lady who asked that question, it is very important to not repeat things that don't work. So if you're knocking on that bedroom door and he doesn't come, don't do it anymore. But you could think, who else could encourage him out? Could it be his best friend? Could I nudge his mom or his dad to ask him to nudge my son into doing a shared physical activity online? So there are other people in his life who could nudge him into some physical activity. The other thing, these are the key areas if you have a teenager. Number one, you must pay attention to their sleep patterns. 92% of teenagers who actually suffer from depression, it will initiate or show itself as a sleep problem. So for all of us, there's a lot of unpicking there of different issues. I would be making sure he had a set bedtime, that he's encouraged to have good sleep hygiene, because that can really badly affect mood, exacerbate anxiety. And there's a podcast that I've done with a Professor Michael Gradisar that I would encourage your colleague to listen to on my website. Secondly, sleep. So sleep is critically important, affecting mood. Number two, that parent is absolutely correct to intuitively assume that teenagers need to get out and about and exercise. We have to find a way. Anything that is appealing to that boy will matter. In our house, we panic bought so many outdoor things. We'd be here for 3 months, which we seem to be, to make sure our children have some choice. It doesn't matter what it is, whether they're bouncing on the trampoline, skipping, doing weights with a parent. We have to nudge them into those physical experiences. Thirdly, I would be extremely looking at his diet. We know that teenage mood can be affected by nutrition and diet. And in fact, there was a beautiful study a couple of weeks ago that revealed that dark fruits like blueberries and blackberries can actually, over a 4-week period, alleviate symptoms of teenage depression. So there's a lot of things to look at there. That parent needs to take the pressure off herself, do never repeat things that don't work, and think a more innovative way of how she can actually change his behavior. The last thing I want to say about that is low mood does not equate to depression. It is not a clinical diagnosis of depression. And for anyone listening who has a teenager who is concerned about whether or not they are actually clinically depressed, a very, very neat and efficient way of thinking about that is to listen to my podcast with Professor Shirley Reynolds, which is free on my website. And Professor Reynolds is the global expert on teenage depression. She has 2 books, which I would recommend, one of them to the parent and one for the teenager. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Low mood is typical in teenagers. They're up and down like this. But if you're really concerned about depression, you should always speak to your GP, even now, absolutely. And secondly, just listen to that podcast and see what resonates or what doesn't.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's really, really sound advice. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of questions on homeschooling. I might combine them because I can see the time is ticking away really quickly. So I've got Tracy asking, she said, I've seen different views about homeschooling. I've seen some in the education sector don't worry about it. Let me put the other question in and then maybe you could cover them at the same time. Hannah has asked, how can I motivate my child to do homework provided by the school? Any tips to keep children focused and engaged and to work independently? Big question.
So happily, I've got very strong views on this. So, because this is one of my key areas of interest. Number one, I think that parents set the tone. You know, there isn't a chance of my children getting off doing their schoolwork. You set the tone. Schoolwork matters. It still matters. And I think that the routine and the rhythm that we inject into our daily lives is very important. Now, this is very age dependent. I have a 10 and a 13-year-old who can do this stuff on their own. If you have younger children, it's going to look different, but I still think there needs to be a rhythm and a routine to home learning. I will never be able to replicate the learning that happens in school, but there is a massive risk of our children falling behind. That is very, very difficult to amend later on. So my big message is it's our jobs to keep the learning going as best we can. There are so many resources available to parents, it's mind-boggling. But what I would focus on as a family is consolidating the learning that your child has done over the year. So if a little year 1, 2 child, focus on phonics, focus on handwriting, write postcards to grandma, focus on the learning at home should always be fun when you're not doing the schoolwork. So the schoolwork has to be done. A little tip that I would give you is to use accessories. I don't know if you can see this. I have millions of these. This is a 30-minute egg timer. And children are very responsive to knowing. They're much more motivated to do the task if they know that it's going to end at the end of the sand running into the other part of the bottle. So I have 5-minute timers, 20-minute timers, 30-minute timers. Other that I would give in terms of motivating them to do the work, they are comfortable. If they're not comfortable, it's okay for them to do their maths on a beanbag. Give them some agency, some choice in where they do some of these activities. Make sure they have little snacks, because snacks can help them feel motivated, like you or I. We're happy to write if we're just sitting nibbling something. And make sure they have an incentive. I've to my children, brilliant, it's Friday. So they understand there is a change of rhythm, that they can look forward to Friday. We work hard during the week, then it's Friday, and we've got things to look forward to. Another little tip If you have an animal at home, like a cat or a dog, puppy, or a hamster, whatever, we actually know from the research that those animals, you might not want your child to do their schoolwork with the cat on their lap, but actually an animal can reduce children's anxiety, which actually enables them to do their schoolwork. So in neuroscience, we know from neuroscience that animals reduce anxiety and actually can enable learning. So there's a little tip for you that might work. That cat or dog might come in very, very handy. If you have a child who's overwhelmed, always take things in small chunks. So you might say, and just do this little piece of work for 15 minutes, and then we'll have a snack. And that might feel more doable than just been handed a whole ton of homework. If you have a child in GCSE year or A-level year, and their exams have been cancelled, my personal view is that they should absolutely still be studying as if that exam was next week, because if they do not get the grades that they want or deserve, there will be a chance of a repeat. So why wouldn't they be sustaining that stamina? The great test of our children's resilience, academically and emotionally, is now. And I think it's really important that we as a family sustain learning that has taken place over the year.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions. So if anybody wants to ask a question to Kathy, I've got my eye on the question and answer box. One of them I think you've already covered, actually. It's about teenager or younger child as well. This low mood, this up and down. So I think you've sort of covered that. Although the mum is saying she's feeling exhausted trying to keep everyone happy. So that's back to your first point, Kathy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, remember, all of us have experienced very low moods and feeling really upset about what's happening in the country. But, all of us should have one friend that we can ring up and have a good moan or a cry to. And it's really important to say to your family, this bit isn't working for me. Do a family audit. I have a traffic light system. A red Post-it note means under no circumstances come into my room because I'm chatting to my friends on a Friday night. Or an amber light means you can come in, but you have to sort of hand signal. We have to create new boundaries around self-care. Make sure if you're feeling overwhelmed that you have people who can support you, and think about who those friends are, who those colleagues are.
Thank you. I've got, and actually this is another one that came in very strongly when we asked our members for questions around screen time. So the question, I feel like the level of screen time has increased significantly with everything. So online learning, online homework, online chats. Should we as parents be concerned? What should we keep an eye out for in terms of changes in our children's behaviour?
Right. So this is a great question. Thank you, Deborah. And here's the answer. Pre-COVID, parents were very concerned about length of time spent on screens. There isn't a shred of evidence to suggest that length of time on screens will affect anything other than eyesight and posture. So at the moment, what I'm worried about is my children's eyesight and posture. Secondly, do not worry about what if your child has to spend, like my children, all day on their laptops doing their schoolwork, that's just it. We can't control that. That is just the way it has to happen. Thirdly, it is extremely important, and I have asked this question of 3 of the top neuroscientists in the world in the last 2 weeks. Every single one of them agrees our teenagers desperately need digital connection, social connection through digital technology with their friends. It's very, very important that they have that. It is a lifeline. We need to make sure we value that way more than anything else. So don't worry too much about screen time. However, in my household, for example, I've told the boys they can only have 2 hours a day max on games. So just to, there has to be a balance within your own family life that you're comfortable with. We've never veered from that rule of 2 hours a day max on games. The other reassuring thing and counterintuitive thing to know is that gaming in itself, as long as it's age appropriate, for example, doesn't harm children. There's no evidence to suggest that it actually does. And in fact, there's some really interesting research that shows gaming improves many children's visual, spatial awareness and other skills. So my big answer is, don't get het up on screen time. Do be concerned about eyesight and posture, and make sure, this is the most important thing and something I'm absolutely passionate about. Great importance is your child's awareness of digital hygiene. So for many, many years, I've been preaching to parents, you know, for example, we know that the average age of encountering pornography in this country online is 11. So I've been telling parents that for years. And just this week, I've had lots of phone calls from parents saying, oh my gosh, you know, my son has been watching pornography. You know, so this is a big issue. Digital hygiene, what your child is doing online, who are they talking to online, is one of the biggest parenting concerns of the century, you know. So let's look at the right questions rather than length of time on screens. We're looking at what they're actually doing on it.
You know, that is absolutely brilliant advice. Brilliant advice. I'm very conscious that we're running out of time. We've got 4 minutes left. And as this is our first stab at this, I'm not sure if we'll just be cut off at 9:45. So if we are, to everyone on the webinar, then apologies. But let's see if we can just cram in one last question. This is from Sarah. As a family, how do we begin to prepare for the next transitional phase? We've just spent weeks being told to stay at home, and now there's talk of our lockdown being eased. Any thoughts on how we cope with this?
So what Sarah is referring to there, when lockdown started, many of us had a deep sense of shock that this could possibly be happening. And now we're in a period of what's called adaptive coping. We've got used to it. We've got new routines and everything. And now the thought of exiting, of transitioning to a new stage is terrifying. And that is a very normal response to change. So what I would be doing, what I am doing, is very gently saying to my children, the rules are going to change. And one of you may go back to school and one may not. But children need little crumbs for a little while before they adjust to the new normal. Do not exhibit anxiety about transition to your children. If they think school is a dangerous place to go, you will have great difficulty getting them there at any point in the autumn. And this is a big point about transition in general. If children hear parents talking about transition in terrified tones, they will think school is a scary place to go. Now, we all have our concerns about all sorts of things, but I'm trying to model to my children that I'm looking for good quality evidence. I'm going to be guided by the head teacher. There are people that I trust who will help us make that decision as a family. And we're, you know, sewing up our face masks as we talk. So we have to gently introduce children to these new phases, and don't be afraid to do that. Small steps, take each day as at a time, and model that we value high quality evidence as a family.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Kathy. I think we're gonna finish there. There's some questions that haven't been answered, but what I might do is try and collate those into a little pack and do some advice after the event. Thank you so much for giving up your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant. I know that you have a newsletter, so I'll send that link out to everybody as well, that they can subscribe to, as along with your website, so they can get all this information. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for asking me. Have a lovely day.
And you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.